Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast Network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.
Welcome to Hong Kong Confidential. I'm Jules Hannaford and I'm your host. I'm an Australian woman and I've been living in Hong Kong for many years. I'm a mother, a teacher, an author, and I want to share my wisdom and the wisdom of others with you. Thanks for joining me and I hope you enjoy the show. Hong Kong Confidential is brought to you by Teresa's Turkish Towels. Teresa imports the finest 100% Turkish cotton towels that dry very quickly, making them perfect for Hong Kong's humid climate. Say goodbye to the traditional smelly and stinky towels and try the colourful and fresh selections available online or in Teresa's Wan Chai store. Use the promo code CONFIDENTIAL online or mention this podcast when you visit in person to receive $100 off your entire order when you order 2 or more towels. With 100% satisfaction guaranteed or your money back, the only thing you've got to lose are the musty smells that permeate traditional terry towels. Visit www.hkturkish.com in order to get the address and directions to Teresa's semi-hidden location. Today I'm here with Sheila Andreen, who is a renowned director and producer from IndieFlix, and you are here in Hong Kong screening your film Angst. Welcome and thank you for joining me today, Sheila.
Oh, thank you, Jules. Thanks for having me.
Sheila, can you tell me a bit about how did you get into the film industry?
I was actually studying political science at NYU in New York and fell in love with a director who did commercials. And since I'd been doing 3 jobs and going to school and was a bit bored, when I met him and helped him on a commercial he was doing for surf detergent, I was suddenly making $800 a day, being fed really well. And I thought, I think I'll take a break from school because he and I worked really well together. So I ended up doing a lot of commercials with him.
Oh, fantastic. And how did you end up forming your own production company, IndieFlix?
I went from doing commercials to doing television. So I worked on TV shows such as The Wonder Years and Party of Five, Dawson's Creek, What I Like About You. And during my hiatus, because I only worked 9 months out of the year at Warner Brothers and Sony, I ended up doing either producing or directing a short film or a feature film. And my first feature, we went to a ton of film festivals in the world. And I started to learn about all these other films that were being made and not being picked up by Hollywood. So nobody was seeing these movies.
Like what sort of films? Documentaries or?
Documentaries, narrative, short films, you name it. And, Hollywood only has bandwidth to take on so many movies. It always costs money. And they fill the pipelines and this was back in 2004. So a little more antiquated system. And Hollywood was the gatekeeper and they controlled everything. When I learned that there were so many films, like literally when you think that there are 60,000 films made every year around the world and less than 1% actually get picked up for distribution.
Is that right?
That leaves a lot of films unseen. Now, granted, there's a lot of crap. So if you go with the 80-20 rule and apply that, which it's probably not even that, it's probably more like 95-5. So even if 5% of 60,000 films, that's still a lot of content that's not being seen. So I knew there was a lot of content out there, really great filmmakers who had mortgaged their lives in order to make these movies, and even with movie stars in them, and nobody had seen them. I ended up with one of our films, Outpatient. My producing partner, Carlos Candiuzzi, and I were taking that film around, and we got 3 offers on that movie, and with an advance. And in looking closely at those distribution agreements, I realized it was kind of like a sea of red flags coming off the page, and there was no cap on expenses. In other words, they could spend millions of dollars in marketing, and that would all have to be paid back before we ever saw a dime. They could not release it. They wanted to own it for 20 years. They wanted to maybe change the title, put a bloody knife on the cover,
Right, so you lose creative control.
Total creative control
right.
and
so
the context. Yeah, so I just thought, is this a good deal? And I went around because I worked in television and I was at the studios. I spoke to different people in high places who said, oh, yeah, this is a great deal. They're all great deals. You should take one of them. And I said, I need to pay my investors back. And they said, well, you don't make movies to make money. And I just thought, well, but I need to eat and I have people to pay back. I kind of got a real awakening. And rather than taking any of those offers, Carlo and I started IndieFlix. And we literally sat down on a curb. And I think we used the back of a bank deposit envelope that was sitting in the side of the car. And we wrote down everything we wish existed in a distribution company.
Brilliant. Like your wish list, putting it out to the universe.
Yes.
Oh, how fantastic.
Very idealistic, very naive. And we started IndieFlix.
How long ago?
2005.
Oh, great.
We started it in 2004, like literally the next week. And in 2005, we launched. Carlos stepped back about 8 months later. He's a theater guy. He loves the arts, and he's one of the nicest people on the planet. But he basically said, I need to see the audience, and I can't see the audience on the internet. So here are the keys. You've got this. You got 6 weeks of funding. Go for it. And I just was like, oh, because I hadn't been focused on the funding. I was focused on building the library and the brand. And he was doing more operations and the business side. So he stepped back. And I said, no, you can handle this. I'll cover you until you come back. So I dove in and first thing I thought was I better look at, we have 6 weeks of funding left. I better see how much it costs to run. What are we doing? And when I realized it cost a lot to run the company, I laid off people. I got us out of our lease in our office and I took us down to a little tiny 1-bedroom apartment and just started focusing on building the library, creating some marketing assets and getting people to know about IndieFlix and stretched those 6 weeks out to more like 3.5 months of funding. And then went out and started to raise more money. And a friend of mine from high school came in and it's really because of him that I've been able to make this company what it is today because he had faith in me and belief in this model.
That's lovely.
And he has supported us all throughout.
Amazing.
You need people to get through things.
You do, don't you? Need support and backing.
Yes.
And was Finding Kind one of your first films?
Finding Kind, yes.
It was. Can you tell me a bit about it?
Finding Kind was a documentary made by Lauren Paul and Molly Thompson. And Lauren's the director. She had been bullied. And I think people thought, you're this beautiful blonde girl with a great family. How could you possibly be bullied? And I really related to that because, I'd been bullied. They teased me because I was half Chinese in an all-white community. But I learned quickly that everybody experiences bullying. Nobody is spared that. On some level, you're either the bully, you're the bullyee, or you're the bystander. And so Lauren and Molly, a friend of mine, knew their mom and sent that movie up to me, and they were looking for some finishing funds. I connected with that movie so much because I'd been bullied, that I thought it should be seen in schools and not online on my platform. So I helped raise more money to finish the film and to do a theatrical screening in New York and LA to qualify for Academy consideration, something that Lauren and Molly really wanted. And I was curious too. So we did that. And it's Lauren and Molly's brainchild. I came in, helped finish it and help get it out into the world for their good work to be really appreciated. And with the Kind Club and the Kind Campaign, which in the movie, it's about the creation of the Kind Campaign. And so that's how they devote their lives now, is to spreading kindness.
Do you have any anecdotal evidence that this film has made an impact in schools and particularly with girls? I know it's directed sort of to bullying between girls, isn't it, more so? Do you have any sort of story you can share with me about the impact it's had?
Well, I can tell you that in the first few years, literally, I feel like I was going to a screening of Finding Kind every other day with the Q&A and moderating. And what's great is that Lauren and Molly came up with this way of having an interactive workshop or assembly where you write down a promise, the kind promise, what you're going to do moving forward as far as being kind, whether it's smiling at someone or sitting with them at lunch or just being kind.
That's such a nice idea, isn't it?
Well, and it's funny because you'd think, really, we have to teach kindness? I always thought people were born kind. Even though people bullied me, I felt like, take away the bullying, they're kind. Their core is kind. But we do need to we need to be guided to tap into that kindness. It's just not innate anymore. I think the world just moves fast and there's not enough emphasis on it. So with the interactive assembly, that really brought out a lot of, we have stacks and stacks of kind cards and apologies, and people would read them out loud. And it was so healing. It was always like community therapy. and run into people. We have emails, we have testimonials, we have people who've said we've saved lives. People are much more compassionate. I had a woman come up to me once after a screening and she said, "Oh my God, I was getting ready to go to my 25th high school reunion and I was thinking about my outfit and I've been working out and, I can't wait to go and, be that person I was in high school." And then she said, "I see this movie and I was a bully." She said, "I am not wearing that outfit and I'm going to show up and I'm just going to apologize to all the people." And I was like, it's still kind of,
that made my head tingle.
It gets me choked up because to see someone to own that and to step into it and to say that it's not too late to go back to people that I was so mean to and to apologize. I mean, that's a full circle thing.
I know. And I think there's a lesson for our listeners out there that it's not too late to make amends.
Never. It's never too late. And it's not just for the other person. It's really for yourself.
It's good for you too. Yeah, exactly. Sheila, tell me about your film Screenagers. What's that about?
Screenagers is Dr. Delaney Rustin. She's the director, and it was all her idea. She was the one that she came to me just really to talk about distribution in the beginning. And we ended up clicking, and I got much more involved. It had been a topic that had been very much top of mind for me, and that I had been struggling with myself, with my children, and with myself. And of course, you notice it everywhere, right? Everyone's on their phones, and I am the worst.
Me too.
I mean, I'm terrible. I'm worse than my kids. And so I really only take on topics that I'm keen on, that really resonate with me in my heart, because it takes all of you to make a movie. Like, you have to be passionate about it 100%.
Yes, you put your heart and soul into it, don't you?
You got to get through the tough stuff.
Yeah.
And so I came aboard. I helped raise a significant amount of money and came aboard as a producer, an executive producer, and then helped to take that movie out into the world. And we were the distributor for the first year, where we basically tapped into our database and just kind of blew it up and took it out.
And what was the basic message of the film?
Just how to navigate growing up in the digital age. Screenagers is a little bit of a departure from my other films that I work on and produce, in that it's more of a parenting tool. And, Finding Kind was for everybody. It was for kids to watch, to be inspired, to be kind, and for parents to watch as well, and for all of us to have this conversation. Screenagers sort of found its niche in parents wanting to see it so that they could guide their children and know how old they should be when they get a phone, and how much screen time is healthy. It was really the first movie made on this topic, which I think is part of the reason why it's success, other than it's a good movie. But you follow Delaney Rustin's life and her children, explore from that standpoint. How do we navigate it, right? Our kids don't want to talk to us. When do we give them a phone? How much is okay? How do we enforce these contracts? What's the oversight aspect? So that film has been a lot of fun to take out.
It's interesting with parenting. It's the only thing in the world that you don't have any training for, and that you're flying blind, really, aren't you, as a parent? And so many parents, especially of teenagers, are looking for guidance and advice on a whole range of issues.
Yeah.
I can imagine that Screenagers was really well received by parents. Was that the case?
Absolutely. And educators alike. Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know that kids were so keen on it. And it's not that kids don't like it, because kids actually really love it. It's that they have this fear before they see it, because of the title, that if their parents see it, then their parents are going to take away their phones, when that's not the case at all.
No, but it's more about setting parameters and opening up conversations, isn't it?
Exactly.
You're in Hong Kong screening your film Angst. How did this film come about?
A friend of mine had asked me to make a movie about mental health, and I flat out said no. I don't know anything about it. It seems heavy. And truly, I knew nothing about mental health. It was just a topic it'd be like me, someone saying, "Oh, will you take on the healthcare in the United States?" It's like, no, I don't know anything about that. I think it's how a lot of people feel about cryptocurrency now. I'd be like, what? And it also felt heavy and depressing to me. And I'm all about being uplifting. My nickname is Fortune Cookie and Silver Lining Girl. And so, I just felt like it wasn't a good fit for me. And she kind of kept asking me, and I kept saying no. She would put a little reminder. And then I learned that she died by suicide on one of the holidays. And
I'm sorry to hear that.
It really stopped me in my tracks. And I will never forget, I was in my dining room looking out the window. It was 7:00 in the morning. She had died the night before. A friend had called me, and I just thought, okay, I'm going to make a movie about mental health. And I just burst through my fear. I had no idea what that movie was going to look like, but I sort of put the word out. I'm making a movie about mental health. And they were like, oh, okay. What is that going to look like? I don't know, but it's going to be filled with hope, resources, tools. It's going to be light. We're going to make talking about mental health cool. And then I got involved with a little project with a group of fabulous women who were making this one project, but they were more focused on like suicide prevention. And so I realized that was my sort of first entree into learning about the different sort of buckets of mental health, the little segments and layers. There's so many layers of mental health. And I just thought, I don't want to do suicide prevention or that story. I need to do something that's much more universal and lighter. I thought anxiety. It's sort of like the tip of it, right? And we all have it. And that's something everyone could relate to. And why is it that so many people have diagnosed with anxiety disorders now? So I thought, let's explore that conversation. And literally, when I pulled away from the other film, my daughter said to me when I told her I wasn't going to work on it, not in the capacity that I was. I still absolutely support that project. She said, you cannot abandon this topic. I am my first year in college or second year in college. I have friends who talk about suicide. They talk about anxiety. They're not functioning. I don't even know how to respond. Mom, you need to make this movie. And I said, okay. I was a little reluctant, but I said, okay. And literally like a couple days later, I saw the whole movie. Like it was one of those kind of things.
In your mind's eye.
I watched it. I watched the whole thing, like probably in a nanosecond.
Wow.
I knew the name. I knew the colors. I knew the feel, the texture. I could even see some of the faces. I knew the feeling. I could hear the people talking about it after they saw it. I was like a time warp, quantum, whatever you call it.
That's awesome.
And I saw the whole movie and I just thought, oh, it's angst. Anxiety isn't cool, but talking about it is. And I just said, okay, I'm in it. I'm going to get started. I'm going to raise money. It was so hard to raise money for it because people were like, wait a minute, you're going to make a movie about mental health and take it into schools.
And why did they think that wasn't such a good idea?
Because nobody knows how to talk about it. Because it's uncomfortable. Because we don't know how. I think people were more fearful, like, well, you could trigger someone. It should only be screened in little groups of 5 or 10 people so that there's a counselor right there to take care of people. Like, how can you do that? That's irresponsible of you. And, I was sitting there thinking, well, how am I going to do that? And I started talking to experts and other people, and I realized there was so much fear around telling this story. So I just thought, you know what, we're just going to go in. And, I was inspired by Finding Kind, an empowerment project, which is another film I worked on, where we just interviewed people and just let the story come out, capture their voices, string it together in the editing room. And it's basically like holding up a mirror and letting everyone look into it and hopefully seeing a little bit of themselves. It's not about passing judgment. It's not about having the answer. It's about having a conversation. There is no right answer.
And that's one of the things that I got from the film is that one of the main messages for me was if you are struggling with stress or you're worried or you have anxiety, the best thing to do is reach out and talk to somebody. And if we can encourage that in young people, then that's great, isn't it?
Yeah. I mean, it's so simple and it's so powerful and it's free. And I have a foundation as well called the IndieFlix Foundation. We basically raise money to support stories that we believe can change the world within a minute of viewing.
I love that.
It's about opening up hearts and minds and, supporting projects that create tools or can provide tools that you can do right away. Angst is a perfect example of it. You can snap, you can journal, you can listen to music, you can hold ice cubes. There's all these wonderful things you can do to help relieve anxiety on the spot. It's free. It's right there. You don't always need another person. You don't need a doctor's note. You don't need insurance.
And you don't need to feel shame.
No, I mean, the goal is to not feel shame and to actually make it kind of cool to talk about it and to help each other get through things. That's one of the things I've learned with the screenings of angst is that some institutions are nervous to show the kids because they're afraid that the kids are going to catch it, that they're going to suddenly start saying, like a cold, and start saying, oh, I have anxiety. I can't go to gym or do that presentation. But the kids, that's not what they want.
No, and they don't do that.
Yeah, they don't do that. When they say, that's me on the screen, I relate to that, then they're saying, help me get through something. And it isn't through everything. And isn't that the point of being on the planet, is to help each other?
Absolutely. And to be kind.
Yeah.
And to support each other.
Yeah.
And to be open to talking about or being true to who you are, being yourself and asking for help if you need it and being vulnerable and not being ashamed.
Yeah.
So I think it's amazing. That one of the scenes in the film that I absolutely loved the most was the little boy talking about his hair and then Michael Phelps came into the room. That gave me absolute chills and brought tears to my eyes. And I think I just loved it. How did you get Michael Phelps on board and how valuable is it having somebody of his celebrity opening up and talking about it?
Well, Michael has been very open about advocating for opening up the conversation around mental health and sharing his own struggles. And it's amazing when you have someone who's like the fastest man in water on the planet and the most decorated, most medaled athlete in the world to say that despite reaching those heights that he felt, the depths that he felt, And he's so candid and genuine and open about it, which is so powerful because he's modeling the conversation. Think of all the men, the young boys, the athletes, but then also all the women too, because he's that kind of guy.
Yeah.
So many people can relate. And now they're opening up because he walked through that first and kind of paved the way to say, it's okay to not be okay. It's okay to talk about it. In fact, you should talk about it. In fact, you need to talk about it. A couple of things he says in the movie, which is so great, is we have what we need to get by, to get through. He always pulls from behind him in the film. I always picture an imaginary backpack because it's always with you. Your tools are always with you, but you need to learn how to use them and you can get through stuff and you need to start learning how to use it early. I'm a big advocate for self-care, prevention, well-being, taught at home, taught in schools, equally as important as math, science, and reading. It's a whole holistic approach to life. And I think self-care is really important. Now, I'm such a hypocrite because I'm running around the globe right now, screening angst and doing Q&As and moderating and filming
I admire
live.
you. You're amazing.
And I'm not practicing self-care at all. So that's something I need to really work on.
I think we can all take something from that. But the fact that you are traveling the world and taking this movie into schools, it's such an altruistic, wonderful thing that you're doing. But it is so important, isn't it, that young people get these messages early and that they're not thinking about this and working it out at 40, but they're really making these changes and accepting and thinking about these things as teenagers. So how important do you think it is to get it around in schools?
It was a great question. My dream for schools is that everybody in the school see it, from the parents to the coaching staff to the faculty and to every student, that we made it under an hour for a reason. So it could be screened during a classroom period.
Good thinking, yeah.
You don't need to schedule a special assembly, and to have evening screenings for parents to come so that the whole community can come together and witness each other watching it. The students want to watch with their peers anyway. They don't really want to go with mom and dad to an evening screening and sit there during the Q&A. It's not their temperament. The parents all want to watch together because then they can talk about it, and the faculty all watching it. Then we have permission to talk about it on the football field, at the bank, in line for lunch, at a dance. We can talk about our feelings. We can talk about our insecurities. We can talk about our vulnerabilities, and we can listen, and we can be there for each other, and we can get through it. And it's really quick to get through when you actually have that compassion, that empathy, that social emotional culture where you're not afraid to talk about it, where it's a safe place. So school, which is where our kids spend 6 to 8 hours a day, feels safe. That's huge as far as having impact.
Huge.
I wish there was mindfulness. I wish there was a 5-minute meditation every morning.
Yeah.
I wish that was the first thing we've learned making our other movie, that the kids actually are on their phones from the minute they wake up to the moment they walk into class, and then even still a little in class. Wouldn't it be nice if for 5 minutes at the start of the day that there was a bell or a chime that went off, and wherever you were sitting, you had 5 minutes to breathe, or maybe 1 minute. 1 minute at the beginning of every class was your way to reset and regroup. I think it would be so powerful. Or those 3 breaths. And maybe every day there was a new word, a positive word, and that was the mantra for the day.
They're lovely ideas. They really
it's
are.
Just those simple little things make such a huge difference.
I think more and more we're noticing the stress that young people are under with academia, social media, family, pressures of the future and getting into universities and future goals. We're definitely bringing mindfulness into our curriculum at our school, and it'd be great to see other schools around the world doing that. But I think we could still do more. There's room for much, much more. And so I think your advice is really wonderful. And I hope people out there are listening, especially educators. Sheila, can you tell me a little bit about your film Like, and how did that come about, and what are you doing there?
It really came out of when we were going around and making angst. A lot of people thought that the reason anxiety was on the rise was because of social media. But when you talk to the experts, it's really a mixed bag. They don't always say anxiety is on the rise because of social media. In fact, some experts actually don't even say that anxiety is on the rise. They say we're better at measuring and we're just talking about it more, that it's always been there.
That's interesting. I wondered that, and I wondered what the difference is between stress and anxiety. Can you share that with me?
I think stress and anxiety, well, some experts have said they're very much the same. There's a certain level of stress that we have all the time, and it could be more fleeting, but stress, like anxiety, can get to a point where it is debilitating, where it's really bad for your health. Anxiety is, the way I understand it, is it's more of a condition, right? And it's an aspect of self, of our human condition, There's a point where it can become an anxiety disorder where it's too much, where it's debilitating, where you can't go out. Stress is something that's how we respond to things. And it can get to a point where we respond, like our stress levels are so high and we don't even know it, but we're still pushing through, that it has a negative effect on our health. I actually think stress and anxiety are interchangeable. And I think that there's a point where it becomes so great and becomes an anxiety disorder that stress is sort of like left behind and it's a contributor.
By having these films, people can then recognize that they have stress or anxiety and then go to these tips of breathing or apps on their phones or coloring in, or there's so many things you can do to de-stress, going for a run, listening to music, as you said. With Like, what are you actually looking at there? Impact of social media on young people?
We're still in the process of making it, and we've had the privilege of filming quite a few experts. And they do say that, there is an impact that social media has on not just teens with developing brains, but fully developed brains of adults. There's the same sort of release in the brain from the likes and the follows in an adult brain. It equally impacts an adult brain as it does a teen brain.
Are you talking about endorphins?
Talking about, and I can't remember if it was a dopamine. I think it was
dopamine.
A dopamine.
Yeah, dopamine release. So that's to the pleasure center in your brain.
Yeah.
So if you get more likes, you get more pleasure and you're getting affirmed.
Yeah.
But then that can become addictive.
Yep. But his point was it's equally as powerful in a fully developed adult brain as it is in a developing teen or child brain. And what does affect kids more is not always social media. I mean, there is a part of that. It's really just time on our phones. The fact that we communicate so much through our phones, through texting and posts, that we're constantly shaping every single thing we say, and there's no spontaneity to it. You can be a fast texter. Doesn't mean you can go back and change that word before you send. Whereas when you're talking to people, it's very fluid. You look at people, there's a release in the brain. You
can't go back and edit what you've just said.
No, you can't.
Yeah.
So it's a very different effect on the brain, an effect on us socially. And all of the kids we've interviewed so far for Like have talked about how every single one of them has said it's really hard to make eye contact. Like to talk to a person, especially a longer talk, they don't know where to look because they're so used to having their phone. In fact, they're more comfortable having their phone in their hand, even if they're not looking at it, to have a conversation.
Gosh, that is so interesting.
Because it triggers communication.
I wouldn't have expected that kind of response in that depth, that it literally comes down to, I would have expected maybe they say, it's difficult forming relationships or we build our relationships online so much, but I wouldn't have expected it coming down, eye contact. That's so interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, they just don't know how to do eye contact. They're not practiced.
Oh, we need to have eye contact lessons and speaking to somebody face to face in schools.
I've actually asked that question a couple times and the kids have all said yes.
Wow, that's so interesting. What are some other points that you've garnered from the children about?
I think that they find that there's a lot of meanness in social media. They all across the board pretty much agree that they have a love-hate relationship with social media. They are not on it because they love it. They are on it because they have to. Especially the streaks, like
that
the
fear
Snapchat.
of missing out?
Facebook, Instagram, and Snapchat are the three top ones. Twitter comes in fourth. Instagram and Snapchat are the top two. Snapchat has the streaks.
Sorry, what's a streak? Can
you
explain to me?
It's like a Snapchat story where you keep a conversation going and every day, or I don't know how often you have to contribute to it. Otherwise it dies off.
Right.
So there's a pressure that you've invested all this time. You got to keep it going.
Interesting. I tried to get on Snapchat once many years ago and I couldn't work it out, so I deleted it.
I couldn't either, and I still keep trying. And I think it's really embarrassing what must accidentally go out on my Snapchat. Thankfully, it disappears. But still trying. It must use another part of the brain that I don't quite get.
Oh, good on you for keep trying. I like to have it 2 attempts and I'm delete. But to me, it seems like something for young people and that it's not where adults are. And it's interesting that young people
use it too.
Do they?
Yeah.
Oh,
it's just,
wow.
I think it's
young adults maybe, or even
no.
my age.
I know grown-ups, fully fledged over 40 adults who use it.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's interesting. I didn't know that. And it's interesting also to note that the young teenagers, they're not really on Facebook, are they?
No, but they all have a profile. They just don't use it.
Right.
And then, of course, there's WeChat and WhatsApp. It's another biggie. And WeChat is really more for people who are kind of traveled and have an international aspect. And then, of course, WhatsApp is very international and really popular as well.
What's your goal with this film, or are you still sort of forming that as you put it together?
I have a very clear goal with very idealistic. But I would like for anyone, young or old, who watches to be inspired to self-regulate. Because the phone is here to stay. Technology is here to stay. Social media can be really awesome and it can be used for good. I mean, I have personally experienced the greatness of social media. We lost one of our children, and we did a crowdfunding campaign to raise money so we could go over to Ireland to get her, to bring her back for a trial. She had cancer. We didn't make it back, and we lost her.
I'm so sorry.
But we raised quite a bit of money, which
through the power of social media.
Through the power of social media, but more than money, we have community. Coffee community, because she was Ireland's top barista. And my husband wrote 2 paragraphs, went to bed, woke up the next morning, and there was like $22,000 had been raised from Australia, the UK, Canada, Germany, and throughout Europe, all for us to go over and to bring her home. And we didn't bring her home, and we raised even more than that. And what we raised was exactly how much it cost for her to die. But we were left with this love and this community, and people were sharing photos and changing the name of their independent coffee community shop to say for Rochelle, and every money raised that day or that week went towards hospital bills. And, it was unbelievable.
That's amazing.
It was amazing. And that is social media at its finest, or raising awareness, creating solidarity, moving things forward, helping each other, sharing positive stories. That's why it's so important. The other thing I want is for people, please read before you share. Fake news can only really be helped if people stop sharing it. You've got to read stuff. You got to check sources. Maybe don't share as much. You don't need to be breaking news all the time. Read stuff you care about. Read stuff that you actually can verify that it's real, and share that. We can't expect the platforms to do it all.
How much fake news do you think is on Facebook?
74% is what we've been hearing.
That's unbelievable.
We still have to verify it, but it's that high.
Wow.
It's funny because kids actually get their news from Twitter and mostly Snapchat, and they don't share it unless on occasion, but they read it first. It's grown-ups.
Is that because we're so busy?
We're so busy. We read the headline, we share it.
Yeah.
Or we might read the first 3 or 4 lines. We'll read it later, but I'm going to share it because my friend wants to read this. Or, we were just talking about this last night.
And maybe kids are taught to verify sources in school.
Right, exactly.
Taught to verify sources. Just to finish up, do you think that there is a place for technology and phones and social media in schools? And is it really about self-regulation and understanding that your digital footprint matters and being a responsible user of technology?
Yes. I mean, exactly everything you said. We've talked to teachers who said that, their parents are on a movement to ban devices from school. That makes it so incredibly hard for teachers because so much of the stuff is on a cloud. We need to teach kids how to navigate it. When they blocked the Wi-Fi so they couldn't access social media, kids used their personal Wi-Fi. They figured out a way around it. And all you
servers, did VPNs, all of that.
Exactly. They just ended up blocking it for the teachers.
Yeah.
So there was and the teachers didn't know how to get around it. So it just then creates a wider gap. We have to teach social responsibility offline, online, in space, underwater, wherever you are. We have
and kindness.
Kindness. We have a social responsibility to be kind, to be good to each other, to verify information, to self-regulate, to make sure. One of the things we learned with the experts is, the big question is, well, how much time is okay for social media? You just can't know that. It's so sprinkled in with everything else you do. So the experts have said the ideal goal would be 3 hours offline.
Right.
So that means cook dinner together, get outside and go for a walk, play some games, take the dog out for a walk, do some more exercises, read a book.
Yeah. All things we did when we were kids.
Exactly. So if you can do 3 hours off of your phone and your computer every day, that your life will increase dramatically.
I'm going to try that. Way. I'm really going to try it because I need that too.
And I think really the kids would really like it. Part of the problem is the kids would love to do that. Their desire is there, but you need the parents to participate.
Yeah.
And the parents don't.
So Sheila, thank you so much for meeting with me today. If people want to see your films, check out IndieFlix or follow you on Twitter, how can they do that?
With these particular films, go to indieflixfoundation.org. And if they want to actually subscribe to IndieFlix, which is content for a purpose, but doesn't have these films on it right now because they're sort of touring and doing their theatrical around the world, but eventually will be on IndieFlix. We have other content that does address mental health and bullying and empowerment and screen addiction and all of that stuff. And the series will live on indieflix.com. Otherwise, indieflixfoundation.org will take you everywhere you need to go.
Okay. And so if schools and teachers out there listening, interested in showing the films in their schools, they should get in touch with you.
Absolutely. And they can go to indieflixfoundation.org and they can reach all of our different movie websites.
Sheila, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, all of your experiences with us. It's fascinating. It's so enlightening. And I think it's going to make a huge difference in many people's lives. So thank you so much for speaking to me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
It's really been wonderful to meet you. I hope you have a great time for the rest of the time you're in Hong Kong.
Hong Kong's my home. I love it here. I mean, it's my home away from home. So
We've loved having you here. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hi, Confidants. I want to tell you about my Patreon page. I've joined Patreon in the hope of getting sponsorship for my Hong Kong Confidential podcast. Patreon is a great way for my listeners to get on board and sponsor me with monthly payments, and that goes towards my production costs and rewards for my members. If you're interested in checking out my Patreon page, please go to patreon.com and search up Jules Hannaford or Hong Kong Confidential. I would really appreciate you visiting my page. So that brings us to the end of another Hong Kong Confidential podcast. I'm Jules Hannaford. Thanks for joining me, and I hope you'll be with me again next week. If you enjoyed today's podcast, please can you go to iTunes to rate and review it. I would really appreciate your feedback. You can email me at jules@hongkongconfidential.net, and you can find me on Facebook and Instagram at Hong Kong Confidential. If you'd like to hit me up on Twitter, it's at Jules Hannaford. I would love to hear from you.
Are you a podcaster? Maybe you've got that big idea and you're looking for a network to join. The multi-award-winning Ozcast network can get your content to eyes and ears all over the world. Join now for the first month free, and you could be featuring this sound at the beginning of your podcast.
Ozcast.
Simply head to ozcastnetwork.com for details.